Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Ushanka Show. In this video I would like to share some interesting information with you about a recent presidential election in Russia. And this is the official logo of that election, Выборы президента России, and you might recognize that V sign which used also by the Russian occupation forces in Ukraine. And according to the official results, Vladimir Putin won with mind-blowing 87.29%. Second place, Communist Nikolai Kharitonov 4.3%. Third place, Vladimir Davankov, party Новые люди, New People, never heard of that party, 3.84%. And Leonid Slutsky from Liberal Democratic Party, so that's the party that Zhirinovsky used to be the leader of, 3.21%. And another interesting detail I need to point out, below his name, Vladimir Putin, it says Samovydvizhenets, which can be translated like a self-promoted person, so he doesn't belong to any party, was not party nominee. He just on his own decided, hey, how about I run for president? And he won.
Чего не смеетесь-то? Не смешно? Не поняли, да? Это Россия.
And consider the fact that Putin was at power in Russia for close to a quarter of the century, to score almost 90%, that's really mind-blowing once again, and might raise some questions. For example, how is it possible that back in 2018, so 6 years ago, presidential election in Russia happened every 6 years, Putin scored only, wink wink, 76.65%, and his next competitor, once again communist, Pavel Grudinin, scored 11.81%. Back then, Vladimir Putin was riding the patriotic wave created by successful, pretty much without a single shot, annexation of Crimea from Ukraine, and unfortunately, many Russians were extremely happy that it happened. And right before occupation of Crimea, Russian Olympic team scored the first place and amount of medals won during the Winter Olympics in Sochi, once again in 2014. So for all those outstanding, in Russian view, achievements, Vladimir Putin was awarded with only 76.69%. And now, 6 years later, after pretty giant setbacks from Russia and for Russian people, as well as for Vladimir Putin, he got almost 10% more votes. For example, back in 2018, Vladimir Putin broke his promise he gave in 2005 that he will not raise retirement age till he is the president. Soon after his re-election in 2018, the retirement age was raised despite the protest of people, for women from 55 to 60 and for men from 60 to 65. And retirement age of 65 for men and 60 for women doesn't look that bad, especially comparing to the United States, where full benefit retirement age is actually 67 to get your full Social Security payment. The problem that the average life expectancy for the Russian male is 60.7 years and 67.5 for female. So for the guy, expectations, he will live about 61 years and his retirement starts at 65. So he will never see his retirement. In any other country, raising retirement age, breaking your promises will probably bury your chances to be reelected. But in Putin's Russia, breaking promises makes your ratings go up. And of course, the disastrous so-called special military operation in Ukraine with thousands and thousands of dead and wounded shouldn't add any points to Putin as well. Which brings us to the question, is it possible in some way to detect the election fraud? I mean, everyone's seen plenty of videos from Russian election when people jam hundreds of ballot sheets into the boxes, but is there any other way that you could process the information from the election and detect the fraud? Well, some smart people figured that out, and they use so-called bell curve, which is a common type of distribution for variable, also known as a normal distribution. There's a good example of a bell curve when it shows distribution of male height. So how many people in thousands on the vertical line versus the height on the horizontal line, so X and Y. So as you see, there's a bell curve. There's a most amount of people have a specific height, and then of course short people on the left, tall people on the right, and Somewhere in the middle, that's where you average. Another example of bell curve, this is distribution of newborn babies. So the average weight, the most amount of babies, it's about 7.5 pounds. And here's the IQ score bell curve. So it will show you, so we have not really bright people on the far left, super smart on the far right, and average IQ score is 100. So this is your distribution by the IQ score. And this bell curve appears also in election results. So this is what I found for North Carolina in normal and landslide year for the Republicans. So the bell curve can shift left or right. So you see it shifted to the right for the landslide year. On normal year, it's normally right there at around 51% of national vote predicted. So let's take a look at the bell curve of Russian election of 2018 when Vladimir Putin got 76.69%. So this is Putin's bell curve in 2018 election, and you need to keep in mind, so he didn't have a real competition like you have here in the United States, for example. So on the left vertical line, it's how many people at each polling station voted, and bottom line, it's a percentage that Putin got. So as you see, it peaked in about 75%, and then people who areas where they voted with more than 75% start dropping down. So that's your classical bell curve with some issues. Do you see those funky peaks that fall exactly at 85%, then 90%, then 95%? So this is what makes this bell curve artificial. They call them sawteeth. So people don't bother hide the numbers. So they pick, okay, we're gonna do 85% for Putin, and you see the spike. Other areas, they were told to do 90%, you see another spike, and then final spike is at 95%. Now, if you overlap the bell curves from election 2018 and recent election of 2024, which is in red, you see quite a drastic change. 2024 doesn't look like a bell curve. It more looked like a porcupine. And here's the closer look. So once again, in 2024, first giant spike at about 85%. Then looks like maybe 87% and 89%. Another huge spike at 90%. Then another one at about 95%. So those definitely look artificial. This is where the fraud was happening. People were adding numbers. I'm not sure how, but definitely this bell looks like, I said earlier, porcupine. Now, if we look again at 2018 results, so Putin is in blue. His next competition coming is Grudinin in red, and other guys. So all the other guys is pretty much almost normal bell curve, but look at Putin's. He got a lot of spikes, and the people kind of estimated that he got about 10 million extra votes in those gray areas, which look suspicious. And now 2024, look at this wild graph. Do you see any bell curve? It just was going up and up and up. So according to calculations, Putin got about 21,885,000 anomaly votes that shouldn't be if normal bell curve will be at play. And now let's compare 2018 and 2024 next to each other. You see how aggressive election meddling was in 2024. It's just insane. Once again, it's 2018 on the left, 2024 on the right. It's a little bit different presentation, and it shows clusters. So instead of the curve, it shows that the majority of people voted, it's in red, and how they voted for Putin in blue. So you have a clusters, and then whatever drags up, that's artificial add-on. If you compare that on picture on the right, which is 2024, it's a huge cloud. There is no more cluster. It's just kind of smudged towards the 100% as much as possible. And just for the comparison, let's take a look at the election in Turkey in 2023. That was the first round. It's a perfect, pretty much, bell curve. It's the same thing, an election of President of Turkey in 2023, the first round. So you see how the patterns go. Looks like a bell curve on the left. And for the cluster, this is pretty much matching what was officially announced versus what is showed in the results. Another example, presidential election in Moldova in 2020, once again at the first round. Well, you got your bell curves right in the middle, and then there was some cheating going on in the far right corner, but otherwise it's kind of same. You have a clusters in the middle matching the bell curve. And one more time, compare that to the patterns of 2024 election in Russia. It's just wild. And one more example. So this is Russian election 2018, Belgorod region, which is on the border with Ukraine. And once again, this is round looking bell curve. Definitely a lot of cooking was going on from 85 to 100%. And the same Belgrade region voting results in 2024. Very impressive. But you know who is the biggest fan of Vladimir Putin according to official results? Chechen Republic. According to official results, 97% of Chechens showed up to vote, and Putin received 99%. This is just insane. And compare Chechnya to the Moscow region. There's definitely way more Putin fans in Chechnya versus capital of Russia. So it appears that about 22 million additional votes were given to Putin just during the paper ballots. And of course, Russia also had online voting, which is impossible to analyze and calculate because that one is closed and you can't analyze. So people think realistically Putin got about 57% of the votes, and I consider the fact that he definitely had no real competition. But it was important for Vladimir Putin to show that Russian people are behind him despite the war, despite all his lies about not raising retirement age and stuff like that. So this is what's going on in Russia. Well, my friends, that's all I can tell you about the recent election in Russia. I'm very curious what you think on this topic, so please don't forget to comment this video. Please like it, subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания, goodbye.